Hello, good morning. We're here today with Joao Santos. He is a participant of the last batch of the School of AI here at Pi Campus, and we want to talk a little bit with him today to know more about his experience and his thoughts about AI in general, and where are we going, and businesses and all of that stuff. So, hello, Joao.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good, and you?
I'm good, thank you. Just hoping for the summer to pop up really fast. All right, Joao. So you are Portuguese and you have your background is in physics. You actually have a master in astrophysics. That sounds
Yeah.
extremely exciting and geeky at the same time. Can you tell us more about it?
In fact, I did my bachelor in physics engineering, so it was a bit more practical than just theoretical physics. And then I did my master, like you said, in astrophysics, and my always interest has been working in software. So also when I did my thesis in astronomy, I tried to gather both the astronomical side and also the programming side. So I always wanted to, so like this, I could have both the worlds that I liked. And in my thesis, I worked on the processing of data for a mission from the European Space Agency called CHEOPS, whose role was to characterize exoplanets, which are planets outside of our solar system that you want to discover and to understand how they were created, so you can give more insight as to the way that our planet and our solar system was also created. So it's actually an interesting topic.
And that's how you got into AI?
Into AI, not specifically. I started working for my thesis in general data processing with application to astronomy. Then after I finished my degree, I started working in a company in Portugal, in Lisbon, who works in the aerospace sector. So it was the closest I could find to astronomy in the industry, because if you want to really work in astronomy, you have to stay in the university, which is not always like interesting for some people. In my case, I was a bit unsure, so I decided to go to the industry sector, and I started working in image processing with space applications. So I worked in two other ESA projects while I was there. I worked there for almost 2 years, and I worked in processing of satellite data, working processing of asteroid observation as well, and more specifically with AI, I did a small project at some point using data images from drones that were flying through fields, and we had to segment vineyards. In this case, it was for a vineyard company, basically. So you had to automatically segment the vineyard, so you had to delimit in the image automatically where the vineyard was, and give use this information afterwards and give it to the client.
So for that, you use computer vision.
I used AI techniques in computer vision. Yeah. So it was.
And how did you teach yourself, because you had no knowledge, no prior knowledge of that?
Well, I had my background allows me to already have some good knowledge, I believe, in mathematics, physics as well, and programming as well. I learned quite a bit during my bachelor's and my master's. So I started learning a bit on my own, and started doing Kaggle competitions, which for the data science community is quite famous. And I started learning some papers and doing some small projects, and like this I would learn more. And then in my job, I still, like I said, I managed to do a small project using AI, and that's how it went up.
Yeah, it seems like this is the experience of most people working in AI right now too. Their education is really made up of a little bit of this, background in math or engineering, then building their own curriculum to gain these the necessary knowledge.
Yeah, like you don't necessarily need to have a master's in machine learning or AI to actually work on the field. Of course, it helps. Companies have a more how do you say, they have more trust right away on you if you already have a master's on it. So it shows already that you have a good formation on the subject. But a lot of people, since it's it's a field that has been developing a lot in the
Exactly.
last 5 years, 6 years. More people want to join this field and to actually enrich their knowledge with other techniques that are more recent. And like this, yeah, you have people from different backgrounds who are applying AI techniques to their own background. I could have done it in astronomy. I did it in computer vision. Some people are using it for economics. You can use it for a lot of stuff. So
Yeah. Well, like I said, this seems to be the common narrative, going from what you've done, and then going into Kaggle and participating in competitions or doing stuff there. And then comes a point where you actually want to work hands-on on a real world problem or case.
That's true.
And that's how you end up in PySchool. Am I guessing correctly?
Yes. So yeah, like I said, I wanted to work on a different variety of projects, on real projects, like you said, because Kaggle, even though it's quite interesting and you learn quite a bit, it's not exactly the same. It doesn't have all the components that you would have normally in a data science project. So I through Kaggle, actually, I saw the school of AI that was organized by PySchool. So I decided to apply, and I managed to get in, and it was a very, very interesting experience.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit more about this experience. How is it for you as a participant? How is it set up? What are the objectives? How do you split up your work? How do you start approaching whatever challenge you've been assigned to? A little bit more of this.
So okay, the projects are assigned randomly, so I didn't get to choose what project I was working on, which it was cool, actually, because I really liked the project I worked on. Essentially, I worked with two more people. It was an Italian engineer, Daniele, and an Iranian engineer called Moshkan that was finishing her PhD in Germany. So we were all in the same time zone. It was a bit easier to remotely work together because we were all working more or less at the same hour. So that was nice. And in terms of organization, I mean, we were talking between ourselves. We were organizing daily meetings. Usually in the morning, we were gathering the three of us, dividing the tasks for the day, talking a bit more of issues that each of us were having, and to try to define a plan to keep going and to not lose too much time on stuff that was not important. And yeah, for example, I remember a couple of times me and Daniele, we did pair programming sessions. We were programming at the same time, or he was showing me his code and I was correcting him, or the other way around. With Moshkin the same. So we managed to work, and there are tools for us to use, like Git, that usually software engineers use, that makes it way easier for us to work on a project together, especially in code, to work it together at the same time. Yeah. So these were the tools that we used.
And usually the school takes place on the campus. It's a physical program, and because of COVID, it's been forced to go online. I suppose that, but from what you're saying, the actual tools you use to work and the process itself is not affected by the fact that you're working remotely.
I mean, I think it's always affected a little bit, because if I would imagine that if I was in PyCampus doing the same project with the same people, like we would really be working at the same time all the time. We had a doubt, I would just like stand up and go to the person and ask, and the other way around. And with online, it's a bit, you have to write or you have to set up meetings. It can sometimes make it a bit slower than you normally would. But at some point, it also has the advantage that the person can, if there is other commitments or something, the person can manage maybe a bit better if you're doing it remotely.
That's true.
So I think, yeah, I mean, there is definitely advantages on both sides, but it's manageable, I think. Remotely, it's definitely manageable.
Yeah, hopefully we can go back to doing it there at the campus, at the villa, which is really nice. It's also nice just to get to know better these people when you're having lunch or when you have 5 minutes, just to make these acquaintances. All right. Can you I know you guys aren't supposed to go into details about this, but what can you tell us about the actual challenge you were working on?
So I was working on a project for an Italian-based startup that was working on the music industry. So it was actually an interesting project. What they wanted us to develop, I'm not going, like you said, I'm not going to go into a lot of details,
Please.
but it was a music recognition system. So we had to use AI, and in our case, we used deep learning to develop a music recognition system for them to try to fulfill the needs that they needed within the 8 weeks of the program. So yeah, that was it essentially.
And in order to do this, how much do you work, or do you consult with the client? Do you at all? I mean, is there any sort of collaboration?
Yeah, there is. At least there was one meeting a week with them.
Okay.
So like this, our idea of every meeting was to have a presentation prepared for them, to show them what we did the previous week, what we plan to do the next week, problems that we had that maybe they could help us in terms of because they have requirements on their side. So we want to see if we are fulfilling the requirements that they need. And so yeah, we have at least once a week meetings. Later on, we had a bit more. We had another meeting, but it was a meeting to pass on our work to one of their engineers so that he could verify that everything was according to what they wanted. Okay. So yeah.
So for you, at least in your case, in your project, in the beginning, it was more important for you to have the input from the client that it was from them to hear back from you. I mean, it was you needed to verify and clear up some things with them.
Yeah. We had to make sure that we were doing the everything as intended in their side. If they wanted some specific thing about the work that we had to fulfill, we had to make sure that we are delivering what they want. We want always the client to be as happy as possible. So yeah. This is in all projects in everywhere, I would say.
Exactly. I think this is an interesting point because, of course, working on Kaggle projects, you don't have, I assume you don't have this input from the client or this pressure to satisfy and fulfill the client's needs in a weekly basis, almost. And
yeah.
And with this, you have to keep them in mind, which makes me think that I think every day, a bit more every day, businesses are aware that AI might be the definite thing to have or to use or to implement or to somehow, know more about. And I know that because of articles and stuff and news. Oh, that was bad. I'll cut that. Okay, I'm going to start again. All right. So businesses, I know that businesses are every day more interested in including AI techniques or applications into their normal business operations or their products or some aspect of their organization. Now that you, from your experience and having worked on this real case project, how relevant do you think that really is? I mean, are most businesses really in need of or can benefit from AI? Do you think, depending on what they do or what they have? How do you see that?
I think it's what you said. I think every business needs to evaluate whether it's worth it to implement an AI system on their workflow. But it really depends. It can be something for some businesses that you can see in the moment the effect that it has, or some businesses might take a bit of years for you to see the investment that you took later on. And maybe there is some business that maybe it's not worth it right now as the current state of things to use them. But I believe that for a lot of businesses, it starts to be something that you can use because it can help you automate some tasks, and I can definitely help you automate some tasks and have a better revenue at some point. And I don't know how to go into more detail about that. I mean, at first in some businesses, I think, for example, like let's say the medical business, there are definitely businesses that can already profit quite a bit from having, for example, a help to the diagnostic. I'm not saying that AI is going to immediately change a doctor. No, it's most likely it's not going to happen for now. But there are already very good systems that can be very helpful to help doctors to diagnose their patients, and yeah, that's an example that from the top of my head. But
and this is basically the situation now. Now going a little bit, into the near future, how do you think, what kind of impact can AI have in these businesses?
In terms of impact, I mean, well, you can say that by having AI in their systems, they don't need to do a lot of manual work that they would require to hire people specifically to do those kind of things. I don't know, like in my field, for example, like instead of having the project that I mentioned of segmenting the vines, if we were not using AI techniques, we would probably need to have somebody by hand to do it by hand, more than one people sometimes. So you would need to use a lot of manual labor, and that will cost the company much more than having an AI system do it automatically. Maximum in this case you can have is to have just one person to verify more or less if everything is good, but you won't need to have people specialized just in doing masks by hand, or well, you will always need to do it at first to train your models, but afterwards you won't need it anymore, or not in principle. So that would definitely help in the long term.
Yeah, I understand. And that I think from what you're saying is that the most immediate use of AI in probably most businesses, business organization, is probably automation.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
The simplest. But then as far as predictions or maybe simulation or doing I know also natural language processing is also doing quite a bit. I don't know, it will be interesting to see how, and I think this year with 2020 with the pandemic and all these shifts, digital shifts, and businesses finally having to, get there. I think more and more businesses will implement AI in their organizations, not only for automation, but hopefully for something more as well.
I mean, you can. It's not just a question of automation. You really can substitute a lot of works that would cost a lot of time to do it by hand by somebody. It can be even very complex tasks, like you mentioned, translation. Translation is something that you can now do with a very high degree of precision and with good quality. You can do translations from languages to another. I mean, Google Translate exists since a long time, but now there is even more and more sophisticated approaches that you can use. And I think with time, this will get even better with better models, more research. Research is always very important in this field because it's what advances stuff beyond what there is currently. And this is with everything, I would say.
Research is the source of data. So for original data. So that's
true.
Also, from my field, research is the source of data. That's how you know things. You know the questions to ask at least. So you find where to find the answers. All right, Joao. It's this is interesting. I could go on forever and ever, but we don't want to make this too long. One final question for you. You are currently involved. You've stayed with the school. You are now helping out in another capacity. What are you doing?
So I was invited by the program director to join Pi School beginning of this year as a coach, and I will help with the next batch of the school and with other tasks that are required of me from Pi School. There is some other projects going on, some other tasks that we have to do, and I'll be one of my main objectives will be the helping with a new batch. So
when is that coming up, the next batch?
So the next batch, so if everything goes well, it will be on the 15th of March. I think that's the official date. And it will also, unfortunately, still be remotely. because COVID hasn't allowed yet the
Not
COVID
going
situation.
anywhere.
Yeah, for now it's still going to be online. Maybe at some point during this year, the other batch will maybe be in person, but it's still very unclear. So yeah, it will be 15th of March, the new batch, and yeah, and I hope it will be as interesting. I'm sure there will be a lot of interesting projects coming up.
Yeah. All right. Joao, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
I'll see you around the campus then.
I'll see you too.
Bye.
Bye.